If you're watching this, you have sexual fantasies. You're human. I don't care who you are. You dirty little nasty sexual fantasies.
Being passive as a man could be where you just never get the woman. That's one. You just always fall into the friend zone. You become a people pleaser and you really never get your needs met.
One of the themes I've seen a lot with the women I've dated is that there's some fantasy that's related to like a fantasy or a domination. Does that mean she wants to be? Hell no.
In her body, they'll lack masculinity, if you want to call it that. They'll have a childlike way of carrying themselves, like an immaturity. If you're dating a man like this, deep down inside, he might feel like, I don't know if he can protect me.
If I'm a woman, I'm afraid that if I speak my true feelings and assert boundaries, then I'm going to be abandoned or harmed in some way, and I'm stuck in that land of victimization. What does the process look like for reconnecting with that true self and feeling safe? What lies in your dark side, that deep primal sense of self that has ambitions of maybe fame, has sexual fantasies that you might be afraid to admit, and you might have desires for massive wealth? Whatever these things might be, you might find that acting on these things might strike up fear that it's not safe to do so or that you'll be judged. But what if I told you that by bringing the light of your consciousness and bringing love to that darkness and embracing these parts of yourself and having the right environment to do that actually awakens creativity and purpose and joy and abundance in your life? That is the very thing you should be doing in order to live a life true to yourself and where you're connected to a sense of purpose. If this interests you, you're going to love today's episode. I bring on my longtime friend, Dr. Doktor, who's been a coach for the past 30 years and holds a doctorate in clinical psychology. And we break down what it really means to look into the dark side, why we should do it, the value in doing so, and why there's really nothing to be judged there, and the importance of having support in this process so that you can feel connected to your true self and live the life that you truly desire. All that and more in today's episode. I'm your host, Eric Copeland, and welcome to another episode of The Music of Life. I'll see you inside. Dr. Ray, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. All right, today we have a really awesome topic. It's one of my favorite in the world because while it can often be uncomfortable, it is extremely liberating, and it's about embracing your dark side, whether you're a man or a woman. And we're going to go into the topics of concepts like the immature masculine, the immature feminine, maybe also known as the dark. Well, not necessarily. There's like the dark masculine, dark feminine. There's a lot of words around there, a lot of word salad. But essentially, it's this aspect of us that there's like two sides of us. A part of us that wants to be nice, another part of us that wants to get what we want. And how do you integrate those two so that you're living a fulfilled life? So with that, I would love you to just open yourself up or open up the discussion a little bit with what does that mean to you about embracing the dark side?
Yeah, because stuff is coming up already. Well, I'll just be more general because I think depending on a person's already understanding of these concepts, such as if someone is aware of the anima and animus from Carl Jung, they'll go, yes, the dark could be the unconscious, that which is unseen or hidden. The consciousness or the masculine could be considered more of the light, or what we can see. Or sometimes people associate darkness with like evil. Or bad, whereas the light is connected to heaven and more being more playful and joy. And so I think for you and I, we are pulling in those perspectives, but we're really talking about when a man or a woman is operating from a place of not really embodying fully who they are, meaning them being a sexual human, to connecting to their emotions and in their heart, and being able to say connect to their God self. They're not really integrated, and oftentimes human beings are disconnected if they have had some type of sexual trauma, or they've associated their early years of their sexuality to being like being called a slut or looked down upon, then they might cut off that part of their body where they see it as being naughty in a bad way, and where they're trying to be the perfect girl or guy and so forth, and not owning that. But also many clients that I've worked with who dissociate, they have had experiences where they're being raped, and they can see the person on top of them. They leave their body, or after the trauma, they're not there. They see their body as being disgusting now. They don't really want to own those parts of themselves. They even have health issues where they have to get organs removed with whatever had happened through that. So there might be a disconnect from just owning that part of their body. And I think you and I, Eric, when we talk about these topics, we talk about how that connects to our root chakra, feeling grounded in earth, to our second chakra, which is connected to our sexuality, passion, and creativity. And when this part of our body's not operating in harmony with the rest of ourselves, we don't feel that person's fire. We don't feel their groundingness. We don't feel their playfulness. We don't feel their fire. And if we don't feel that, then what can happen is that it could be acted out in immature ways, in passive aggressive ways, to ways where a person just is all in his or her head, and you don't feel that sexual energy that they never have. Maybe they don't have a whole lot of chemistry with many people because there's a stuck, blocked energy. So yeah, that's where I like to start this off with. But also, like, even with you, you mentioned that on one of our shares, how when you got knocked out, when you got hit, you said, I had no access to that part of myself. And it was like months later, you felt that anger. I mean, so Eric just got hit by a guy who was really insecure. He was in shock. You can share the story. And the anger came out later on. And then in time, you recognize, I have disconnected myself to that true raw emotion, that part of myself that could protect a woman, or that part of myself that could fight, or that part of me that maybe could kill someone if I had to protect my family. And you said, I felt disconnected from it. I felt shame. I'd love for you to share that, because we're talking about that as well. Yeah, it was, I mean, there was initial confusion because there wasn't, in my mind, there wasn't relevance or context for the aggression. So I couldn't draw a line where it made sense. And it was more after, in the days after, I just remembered like you being very angry, and there was a guy that didn't even know me that saw it happen, and they were chasing the guy out or whatever. Like I didn't even need to have aggression, because like so many people took care of it. He was gone before I was even really back on my feet. And it was more of like, I started to ask myself, like, well, where's that part of me that wants to choke that motherfucker out? That's a part of me that, like, where's that anger? And I started to feel anger at not being able to feel anger, which is pretty funny, right? And then it was maybe actually about a year later, I was out in Old Town Temecula, and I had a guy for no reason push me from behind. Or I was asking, apparently it was his girlfriend, and I was asking her if the bar was still open, because it looked like she was waiting for friends or something. And he interpreted it as me like hitting on her or something. So I get this push from behind me, and I turned around, and then I felt it, and then it came, and I had like, talk about the stare down of your life. I had this absolute certainty that if he took one step close to me, that I was absolutely going to obliterate him with just, and it was a rush. It was powerful. And I'm glad I was able to refrain myself from being overreactive with it, but I enjoyed feeling it. Right. And it was a reconnection with that intensity. And I noticed from that point on, I stopped having situations. There was one other situation where a guy tried to
with me a little bit, and I squared up on him just instinctually. I'd been taking kung fu and stuff and all that anyway, and I just had an instinctual reaction to square up on him, and I had him dead to rights, right in the box. I could have just taken him just like that, and he backed down immediately. And so I had these moments where that I see where if you don't have some teeth or have some aggression, it's kind of a weird thing where you need to embrace the dark side. And the paradox is, the more you choose to embrace the dark side, the less you'll need to use it.
Yes. Well, you know what I want to put out there right now is I can imagine there are some people already listening to this or watching this saying, oh my God, so you're saying it's okay to beat people up, or they're thinking we're coming from that perspective of being macho and toxic. But I want to bring more light to this. It is the same energy that would, if you're, say, a woman, and there is a man who raises his voice to you, and you were to say, you will not talk to me that way again, or we're done. I mean, it's come from that place. So you're not walked all over like you're a doormat. It could be even with parenting, where your child is like pushing a boundary and wants to run out in the middle of the road. You might like grab their arm and go, listen, do not cross the street without mommy. And they recognize that you mean business because you love this child, and that you don't want your child to run out and get hit by a car. I can keep going down the list of where this energy we're talking about is important, including being able to lean in with your lover when he or she seems checked out, to where they might be sitting on a couch and eating a bunch of ice cream and watching TV, and you know that they're not really happy with themselves, and you see it going on for days. You recognize that by me bringing this up could cause conflict, but you also know that if you don't say something, this could continue, and this could create problems where in a relationship where you do break up. So you're willing to lean in because you're confident, but also you recognize that you have power, and there's power in being authentic in yourself. So therefore, if you exist in that household, you're with this person, say it's your husband or wife, and that if you're the closest person to that, what would you be afraid of if love is not to be threatened? You know, if you're basically saying this, that, you know, I see you, something's going on, share that with me. I can feel your pain. That's even moving into, say, that darker energy that we're talking about.
Well, let's do this. Let's zoom out a little bit, and I want to look at this from 3 different perspectives, so that it can be more relatable to anyone watching, and to maybe see your own story and what's going on. And first of all, just for anyone who doesn't know who Dr. Ray is, Dr. Ray, he holds a doctorate in clinical psychology, and he's been a life and relationship coach for the past 30 years, and he's worked with thousands of clients on their deepest, darkest issues around self-confidence and their capacity to create the life that they want. And he's very well known for creating very rapid results with people through creating, many people will describe working with him like years and years of therapy condensed down into a couple sessions, because of how potent it can be whenever you can give the mind permission to embrace these dark sides or these other aspects of yourself. So that's the intention we hope when you're watching this, is that you can self-reflect a little bit on this information. So here's the 3 perspectives. One, I want to zoom out and look at things culturally, because this is an influence on each of us as individuals. And then from the perspective of how this shows up, because I really love what you sent me on the breakdown of how this can show up in men versus women a little bit differently. And again, we realize that there can always be outliers, and we're, might say, well, this is too heteronormative. It's not really. When you can reflect on yourself, take what resonates with you, and listen and pay attention if something makes sense. And if you can see that within yourself, then you have some direction or some purpose to move and clean that up. So first, culturally, I'll share what I see my really condensed assessment of our culture and why this might be confusing for people today is this. I'd say like pre-World War II, the dark feminine, the dark side in women was repressed, and they were expected to be the Pollyanna, Madonna, motherly, nurturing, and that's it. We didn't want to hear, just be nice, be agreeable, and we don't care about your opinion and that kind of stuff. So that almost like there was a cultural expectation for a repression of that darker aspects in women. And now it seems like the script in a lot of ways is flipped since the postmodernist movement and feminism and things like that. You see more of men struggling with their dark side as well, where they're like feeling like, well, to be a man, if I own that aggressive side of me, I'm going to be a narcissist, or I'm going to be, what's wrong with the world, or these kind of messages. What are your thoughts on that from a cultural level?
Well, there is truth in that. Some examples would be where I hear still women say that they love it when a man knows what he wants. I hear this from strong, healthy women, that they're basically saying that I don't need for him to provide financially. I have my own money, or I don't need him to rescue me. I just need him to know his own purpose and how he can just lean in and exist to his best ability in a relationship. But what's happening is that a lot of men are approaching this from a perspective like they're walking on eggshells to that they also, whether they are raised by a over motherly, when I say over motherly, like their mother making decisions for them, to project in fear onto them, to even making sure that they share their feelings all the time and that they're heard, like as if they are an emotional creature, and that's how they find their path, by processing. I've seen a lot of men get caught up in their own processing to where they feel lost. And I've seen this in young boys also. I have a boy who is turning 10, and we can see the difference between the boys who are treated, or I guess they're given kind of more of options of solutions, versus making them just be stuck in the emotions and not do anything with it. And what we see is that the boys who are basically, you might say, reprimanded or course corrected, and then you give them a better option, they typically just want to start with that. They want to move in that direction. It'd be like they do something wrong, and they might, a parent might say, how do you think that made so-and-so feel bad? How do you feel about making so-and-so feel bad? I feel bad. What can you do differently? Well, I can use my words. I could do this. Okay, good. Move on. When I'm seeing over processing, I'm seeing men become very paralyzed in their own emotions and how to navigate in relationships with women.
You and I come from like opposite sides of the tracks in this respect, right? You definitely grew up with like a military father, embracing more of that edginess. You certainly had no shames around sexuality. You were like a stripper.
You're gonna bring it up?
Yeah. Shame on you. You explored that aspect of things, or like you had no shame around it, versus me, like vanilla Mormon boy, growing up like virgin till 30, all because I was taught that the peace that I felt inside, the spirituality, the way to protect that was to not go there. Right? You protect that goodness, that peace, that love, by not going to those dark places. So what it makes you is it makes you chronically avoidant of growth in that area. And I remember, when I finally watched, for my friends who know me, I tell you, it was like a moment where I was watching The 40-Year-Old Virgin, and I was laughing about it. And I was like, just turned 30, and I was like, wait, I'm a virgin. This is me in 10 years. And that started to bother me. And so I, went on my path and figuring all that out. But I found it deeply liberating to be able to approach things that were very natural in me and begin to shed the shame and the beliefs, the hidden beliefs that, that were just, I was just exposed to, but that came really from other people, not really myself. And it's only ever been liberating for me. It hasn't been a limiting thing. It's been very much the opposite. So you have three aspects in men, three specific ways that this can, I'd like to break this down. How, like, in passive men that are more connected to their peacemaking side, which we'll call like feminine. One of the things that you say you've seen in your clients is that they tend to be overly accommodating. So things like seeking approval, or just tell me a little bit more about that. Like, what does that mean to be over accommodating? Because someone might say, well, accommodating would be a good thing. Like, what's the dark side or the danger in being too accommodating? As far as a man or woman or both? Yeah, let's do I would like to do it kind of men, these 3 areas in men, and then you have the dark side and the light side and the dark side men. Okay, well, so being passive as a man could be where you just never get the woman. That's one. You just always fall into the friend zone. You become a people pleaser, and you really never get your needs met. It could build up in your body. You can cross your own boundaries where you're willing to drive people to the airport during the worst time, like 5 p.m. on a Friday. It's like and we've seen these archetypal men where they're considered like the nice guy or the person people take advantage of, where they're invited to go out to a party and they're excited about it, but the boss or coworker just stacks a big stack of like paperwork to go through, and so it could look like that. You'll notice that in their body, they'll lack masculinity, if you want to call it that. They'll have a childlike way of carrying themselves, like an immaturity. If you're dating a man like this, you deep down inside, you might feel like, I don't know if he can protect me, or like if someone were breaking our house, I don't know if he would run to the bathroom and lock the door. Like there's this like lack of balls and being afraid. So those are some things that come up for like potentially like a over accommodating man. And as far as you say, they're driven by a fear of rejection or abandonment. Yeah. That's like what's driving them. So in other words, they're accommodating. Maybe a simple way to think is, have you ever, someone asked you to do something and you said yes, even though you didn't really feel good to you? Mm-hmm. Like you said yes without at least really investigating, why do I feel resistance to this? Why am I saying yes all the time to things? And then you might feel, I notice a symptom of that can be later on whenever you ask for something and someone says, oh, I'm not available, whatever, you start interpreting as like, no one, I'm always the one showing up for people, but they don't show up for me. You start getting into this victim mindset. Yeah. So there is, like, I happen to watch 2 of the American Pie movies. Yeah. It was like last month. And you can see it, and there's like 4 of them. And there's the character, I'm looking at my screen right now, so I don't, mess up on it. But there's the Chris Oz, like the jock guy. He seems to be very friendly and accommodating, like the nice guy. But there's also a guy named the Kevin guy, also has that kind of nice guy thing. And I think the 3rd or 4th one, their ex-girlfriends show up, and there's still like some attraction to that girlfriend still, and the new boyfriend's there, and you can tell how awkward these men are.
but they're saying, it's not a big deal. And you can sense the discomfort in the communication. And it even turns off the ex-girlfriends because it's strange for them. And they don't want to have to mother you or take care of your emotions, but they still care for you. But these guys shrink, but they're just I don't care. It's not a big deal. So I think it's important that both men and women own this, because we teach people how to treat us. And what stems from healthy, grounded boundaries is being able to own that part of yourself that would lean into the conflict. And not like a bully, but recognizing that you exist and your existence is important. And that where you'll shine is where you can be yourself more.
Yeah. I think, one of the things for me, since we're talking from the perspective of man to woman communication, one of the things that was such a revelation to me was to realize that through revealing something that was very primal and instinctual, that might be let's say jealousy. The jealousy comes up. If you own your jealousy, you just own it, not try to make her change because of it, but if you can convey it, what you realize that there's another side of that jealousy is actually desire, and that can actually be very seductive and attractive to her. So in that scenario where if you're you're acting jealous, but you're not admitting it, she's going to see you, she's going to be turned off because you're not admitting it, not because you're jealous. Because you lack the courage to admit it. And then when you can own it, be I guess I feel a little jealous. I want you all to myself. I think you're got that part of me that wants to own you, steal you, whatever. And you're not there's something about that makes her she sees that authenticity, and that becomes very attractive to her. So it's really funny how if you don't own it, the fear you have is going to the resistance you have to owning it is going to make it. That's the thing that becomes the problem, right? Not the jealousy. Jealousy isn't bad, but acting jealous and not admitting you're jealous will make the fear you have come true, right? That you're going to lose her or whatever, the thing is. It's just interesting how that works.
I wanted to share something. I hope, hopefully I'm not totally this is a digression, but, my girlfriend and I are pretty open about what we might be working with in a moment. And the conversation about the darker feminine did come up. And so my girlfriend was perpetrated, and she wasn't supported during that time. And it was where she was judged for what had happened to her. She was raped, and there's been another situation that had happened. So then her mom literally was an ex-nun. So think about that kind of complex. And so for her, she associated being really naughty, like the bad girl, as being really skanky. And she didn't want to be that way. And so let's just say that in our lovemaking, or her leaning into our relationship, or areas in which that part of herself that could be a little bit more assertive, or tapped into what you mentioned, some of that anger in which you had, or even that ownership of if this doesn't work out, I can take care of myself because I'm grounded, I'm rooted, and I exist. It started creating problems because later on here, I would ask, why didn't this happen? Or what were you feeling? Something would come out of that, where it felt maybe negative, and it was her holding back. And we discovered there that she's one of those people where she learned how to meditate. She can really connect to spirit, God, and so forth. But as far as really being rooted and owning that sexuality, it wasn't fully there because it was connected to shame. It was connected to it not being well received.
That's a perfect segue, because I was just about to ask you what was the feminine side of it, because you have the passivity and the accommodation in the men, but there's, in the masculine and the feminine, you have that as well. And you said that it leads to like approval, neglecting personal needs. So I think deep down underneath that, what I'm hearing is like, again, you're coming back to that fear of rejection, the fear of conflict, or I think the primal fear of the feminine is abandonment. Like, if I show this side of me, he's going to think I'm a slut. He's going to not want to be with me. It's going to ruin my chances, or whatever this is. And there's a lack of, that can lead to that lack of authenticity, like she said, like hiding a part of herself. This
is the big one for women, or they could be raped or killed. Because think about this for a moment. If there's some cultures there that are probably still like this, but let's just imagine that we're like in a very primal culture or tribe, and the leader is a man, and he happens to be bigger, and he could just, if I were a female, he could just throw me off the cliff. Well, if I am walking behind him, and say even the society that supports more patriarchy, and that what he says goes, and that he literally has bigger arms than me, then learn how to keep my mouth shut will save my life. And even my children, because he can't take care of the children. So just think of years and years of that as well. And that's something that most men don't even have to think about.
Yeah, it's a very good point. So I don't want to jump ahead too soon, but maybe this will be a good point, because the side effect of all this is that you basically have survival instincts and fear that think that you need to not integrate that part of yourself in order to stay alive or stay safe. And that shows up in the nervous system as potentially intense emotional dysregulation. So, and also identifying with victim, staying stuck in the victim consciousness. Because I think we experience victimization is whenever we have that moment where we like, for example, you give with the woman, in order to stay alive, she compromised her boundaries.
Yes.
Okay. In order to stay safe, I compromise my boundaries. In order to not be abandoned, I compromise my boundaries. And that leads to an erosion of self-worth if you identify with that. So now we come into the topic of like healing and reintegration. What does that look like?
Meaning after they heal that, what could that look like for them?
No. What does, if I'm a man or woman watching now, and I'm either a guy who's being too passive and not getting what I want in life, and I'm feeling pent up anger and resentment towards myself about it. I'm afraid that if I go for what I want, that I'm going to be judged, labeled a narcissist, or evil. If we're selfish. If I'm a woman, I'm afraid that if I speak my true feelings and assert boundaries, then I'm going to be abandoned or harmed in some way, and I'm stuck in that land of victimization. Okay, I feel stuck there. What does the process look like for reconnecting with that true self and feeling safe?
So first off, it would be, if we were to do this correctly, it would be first talking about whatever that trauma is. It could be even a command or something that one of your parents said on an ongoing basis, such as, pretty women typically get pregnant and blah, blah, blah. They become this or that. So there could be like actual beliefs about those parts of ourselves that we shame and we disconnect from. So it's getting clarity with some of the messages that are there within our cellular system. The second part would be, how comfortable are we to challenge these beliefs? Because if you're not comfortable to challenge them, then you'll just continue to perpetuate them. That's it. And so it'd be just important to make sure that however those negative life philosophies you had about sexuality, make sure that there's a bridge to a deeper and more expanded way of embracing your sexuality. So right now, what I'm doing is I'm just looking at the framework. How do I really think about these things? And how do I think about these things, if it's negative, generate negative emotions in myself? Then the next step would be, how do I embody this, which you're basically bringing up, Eric? And it could have been fixed by just doing one of these little exercises I just mentioned, where you actually start to just reframe who you are now and what your connection is to sexuality. But what I've done with people is, where in a good, healthy container where we're exploring these areas, I might have them focus on their root chakra in the color of that darker red. And I will have them focus on it, and they stand and they start moving their body, and there might be some drum beats going on, and where I feel them like connect that part of the body to the roots of earth and move around and ask questions such as, do you feel you belong? How do you feel about your own survival skills? Do you feel safe? And that would be the foundation for any human being to feel safe to express themselves, whether they're sharing music, art, or their sexuality. So if there's blocks, of course, they're moving it out with the movement. Or it might be something they take up with a therapist. But I really believe if it's rooted in our body, we want to make sure that we combine these new beliefs in our body to move around. And then we might explore that area with a dance. It could be 10 minutes, 20 minutes for just that one area. Then we might move it up to the second chakra, which is right there by the belly. And that is connected directly to sexuality, creativity, to your emotions. And a person, a male or female, might start to dance. He might start to cry. He might start feeling this part activated. And I've witnessed clients report how they got fired up and they were aroused. And that's okay. And then they notice themselves judging themselves being aroused. Then they connect that to the story of oh my God, I remember having an erection and being made fun of when I got up to go to the chalkboard, I remember being in class, and I've heard women say this, that I got turned on, I got wet, and I was really embarrassed, and I felt ashamed, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, these things can start coming up for people, and you start seeing the connections. And it might be where you start by moving, and these stories come up, and you want to integrate them. It might be where you're working with a coach or listening to something like this, and you start just writing in a journal your first sexual experiences, to what you were taught about it, to what were you taught about fighting, for what you believe in, to what's your relationship to conflict and leaning in. And you might recognize that, you're afraid to die, that you don't trust others around you, that the reason why you have played it safe and moved more to the, say, Disneyland side of trying to be joyful and all of that, because in your mind, you feel then no one will hurt me. I will not be a sexual object. I will not be objectified. I won't be hurt again, and all of that.
That's awesome. In my own personal story, I can think back when I began to have those awarenesses like you're talking about, where I could see, wow, man, I have a lot of guilt, around sexuality, for example. One of the things that helped me was because I acknowledged it, and because I had the awareness of that, and I could feel the contrast. And I also realized I had a very simple, practical awareness that I had no one around me teaching me the ropes. And so I began to seek paths of personal growth, books, wisdom, insights from people that were modeling what I desired, who I could tell had integrated that. And that was deeply helpful for me because it gave me like training wheels. It gave me things to practice in the world, to practice integrating this part of myself in a way where I could feel, because I think part of what can make growth difficult is even if you calm the emotions and say this all sounds intellectually, or even if it just intellectually makes sense that, yeah, I would love to have better beliefs about this, whatever. Part of the process needs to be opening up to learning. What are your thoughts on that? Like seeking wisdom.
Absolutely. Well, well, first off, I thought if we talked about the stripping and you talked about your upbringing. And similarly to the comedian Joe Coy, my mother was short, had short hair. He talks about his mother being Filipino, and my mother was from Okinawa, and my mother and father were connected to the fire. They were also They're both Sagittarius, and with that, they were also comfortable with walking around nude in our house. I mean, they were like walking around eating eggs. My dad's balls are just hanging there out there in front of the kids, but they wouldn't hide themselves. And my mother's friends also from that culture, they were not embarrassed by breastfeeding in front of children or other adults. Whereas in like the traditional American culture, it would be considered disrespectful or shocking or something. But what I recognized from that is that they accepted their bodies in a way that translated to me also my own sexuality was with more acceptance. It's really interesting how I never knew that my parents' own sexuality, their comfort in it, would translate to my own. And so people will ask me, what did your parents think about you being a stripper? And I told them that my mother made my stripper pants. That's how comfortable my parents were with it. And of course, when I share this with a mother, she'd go, "Oh my God, I couldn't imagine my kid." Blah. I go, "But you have to understand, when I did it, I was a grown adult, and so was my mom. Like she saw me as an adult, and of course, hands down, almost every time I explored that judgment, that woman had issues with her own sexuality, and that those issues would be more often are projected onto their children, to be embarrassed about it, to hide it, to not be open, and so forth. Or you're going to be a slut, or you're going to get raped, and so forth. So, I think it's important that we recognize that if we have issues with this, more likely when our kids have questions, we're not going to know how to answer it. We're not going to know how to answer it in a more expanded way that can really work in a positive way in their life.
So, because there's I think what can make this challenging, I mean, once you get it, it's not, it can make a lot of sense intellectually, but I just want to address that this is something not commonly taught. Okay. You didn't learn this in school. It's not likely, most people's parents weren't educated that way either. There's just a lot of areas where this is not, unless you've gone into therapy or learn and confronted these tools, this whole concept of radical acceptance of all aspects of the self, leading to more peace in your life and less conflict instead of the other way around, can be a bit foreign to people. I've noticed, and I want to get your thoughts on this, just like you have, say, the passive, let's just we'll split it into men and women for a second. Say you have a passive man who was more like me growing up, the more accommodating, nice guy. When I looked across out there into the world, what made me good, and I'm putting this in air quotes, according to the judgment, I could have a judgment of men that were maybe hyper masculine to the point where they lacked any empathy and they were narcissistic or whatever. And so you get this feeling that moving in that direction in any way makes you more like what you judge.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes. You'll hear stories about, I forgot where I heard this recording about 2 months ago, and it was from a psychologist, and he had mentioned how a woman who was really it was a man who had issues with prostitutes that were in the city. And he was on the committee to get rid of these prostitutes.
Yeah.
He ended up getting busted for hiring prostitutes. And you go a little deeper, you find out there was shame in there, and that he was projecting that onto the prostitutes. Okay. So what's interesting about that too is when I was a dancer, it was a dark world, and it wasn't because of nudity. It wasn't because of the act of sex itself. The whole industry is kind of dark as far as it's I don't know if it's because of adult stars, whether you're a stripper or a porn star. What's projected onto you is the fantasies of those who are afraid to do it in the bedroom.
Yeah.
I don't know if they just take on all the bullshit, but the industry has a dark vibration to it. It does. And so I remember when I stopped dancing, and this is after Motley Crue was big. This is in the 90s. And seeing videos like Girls, or videos of women who look kind of like strippers, the fake boobs, they look like porn stars dancing, and that I would always turn a channel. I couldn't handle watching it. Something about it would charge me in a negative way. And it was because, after I got out of the industry, there was parts of me that felt ashamed because other people were telling me that that was not normal. I started taking on other people's beliefs and judgments for the fact that I was comfortable to do it, to where I even saw a therapist to ask the question, why did I become comfortable with this? Because everyone's saying that that's not normal. So I took that on. And then when I saw images of kind of those types of, if you want to call them bimbo type of women.
I know what you're saying.
I'm just trying to give a fucking archetype.
Yeah.
It was just but that was my own shit. Something I needed to heal. So even though I went out there and danced, there was some part of me that felt guilty because it was not socially accepted.
Yeah. Well, I think, there's a word that comes up for me is you do have to find some type of balance. There's a polarity to this. And I think that's something I want people to know is that you can't just be, if you're polarized to one side of this or the other, if you're all light and no darkness, you don't have any growth in your life. You actually aren't reliable. You're not relatable. Okay. And if you're all dark with no light, you can become so self-serving that you're destructive to yourself and others. But the weird thing is, it's weird how you have to bring the opposites to each other, is what I've noticed. So what I see with therapy or coaching or healing work is that you're bringing that abundance mindset, you're bringing the self-love, you're bringing acceptance to the places of you that you believe society says is wrong or shameful or whatever. And when you do that, that actually removes a lot of the destructive behaviors, because you're acting. This is what Carl Jung talks about.
You're right. It's the overeating, emotional eating, gambling, porn addictions. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, look, put them out there, Eric, because you're right.
Yeah. I notice, and again, I like to use anecdotal story because it helps to relate and speak to my own experience. I remember as a teenager, I joke about this, like my emotional pattern was like Sunday, I'm good with God. Monday, I masturbate. Sink into of guilt and shame, pray for repentance, start to feel better. Okay, I can make it till Sunday. Thursday, down the pipes we go again, right? Boom. One more round of repentance. Saturday night, oh shit, am I clean for Sunday? And this roller coaster of guilt, shame, it actually made me more sexualized because I was trying to ignore something. And when you try to ignore something, it speaks louder. It gets louder. If it's you can't ignore truth. It's there. And I noticed one of the funny things when I finally like got through all that stuff and started just owning my sexuality. And I did, it's not like there aren't risks involved, and maybe there are moments or ones I wouldn't mind scratching off the chalkboard. But for the most part, every experience was something that like helped me integrate that and grow. And I didn't die. It wasn't some horrible, thing or whatever. And one of the things, side effects I noticed was I had much more emotional regulation and control over my impulses. So my sexual desire, for example, could be channeled and consciously directed instead of when you're ignoring it, it's just acting out whether you want it to or not. There's no getting away from it.
Well, you and I know that when there's polarity, that it's going to create some type of charge. And an example would be this. I think the number one fantasy for most people was almost getting caught. Was that it? Correct?
Yeah. So, yeah, like turn on is like some type of like public sex,
Okay.
and like if you, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting thing. And I don't know if people can wrap their minds around this. If people were having sex in front of their window, like everywhere, and like it became normal for people to get caught, then it wouldn't be exciting anymore. There's an element to constraints that creates motivation, excitement, and curiosity. So as an example, for like if you're with someone for the first time, there's this natural newness that is there. Oh my God. I know as a man, as a young man also, I remember having that adrenaline rush kick in when, let's just say, my hand goes into the pants. I'm like, oh, she's not moving my hand away. And I'm talking about like it being a teenager or my 20s where
I get it.
There's a lot of uncertainty. You're not crossing boundaries or whatever. It's like it's consensual, but you still don't know because typically stronger women, I know that they might want to go out on more dates. It's where like they're just still trying to gain trust. So once you get past that trust, and they feel like they want to become more intimate with you, your hands go down there. It's like, whoa, there's this excitement. And then when you say, if you have actual intercourse, you've done pretty much almost everything. What's interesting is that, and then in time, it could become like a routine. In time, you could like not bring flowers, or where it's just very mechanical to where you might even lose excitement for at least a man where like it takes more to get an erection. And yet that one moment where like when you're first getting to know your woman and you're courting her, like it's like you were driving home because you didn't get any like sex with a boner. You're like, oh God, like it was just there. Thinking about her was creating, arousal in your body because there was a constraint you haven't gone through. Now, please don't take my words out of context and think that like it's like a conscious thing or it's manipulative. I'm talking about how once we have accomplished something, once we've done something, there's less polarity. And so there's got to be new stuff to show. There's got to be where we have to continue to grow and rediscover our partner for there to be excitement. Then that's when we get to the deeper levels of our emotions, to sharing about what maybe had happened to us. But we need that as human beings. And so what ends up happening is that when we don't access that, say, darker part of ourselves, when we're not fully embodied in that, it's like there's only so much spirit you can talk about. Mm-hmm. There's only so much you could talk about, like in the clouds. Yeah. I want to hear how delicious that strawberry is in your mouth. I want to feel it ooze in your body. And so there's so much richness in life people miss in that primal energy, that darker.
Yeah, it's like all the fears you have of people, oh, what's going to happen if I act on this? Well, a lot of it you don't. I mean, let's just talk about, like, you kind of bringing up, stepping into the territory of like sexual fantasy, for example. It's a really good one to talk about because if you're watching this, you have sexual fantasies. You're human. I don't care who you are. You dirty little nasty sexual fantasies. One of the themes I've seen a lot with the women I've dated is that there's some fantasy that's related to like a rape fantasy or a domination. Does that mean she wants to be raped? Hell no. But there's some type of aspect of it that for some reason there's an excitement around having, something desire you. You're so beautiful that everything loses its control around you and has to have you or move towards you or something, right? It's like there's a power that's there in it. And I've found that being able to talk about sexual fantasies with the girls I've dated, particularly like the last relationship, to talk about that very early on, it opened up this space for some energy between us that was sexy. And yet we didn't need to act on the fantasy. Like, by not making it wrong, it's like it kind of discharges it, but going there with that person and even be able to just even talk about it relieved a lot of the fears around it, and it kind of felt like it opened up this space to explore with that person, and do so in a way that's mutually beneficial, that's mutually loving, that's not compromising of the other person. So that's a clear way where I've encouraged a lot of people when you're first, dating, like, talk about see if you can create a container environment where you can open up and talk about your deepest, fantasies, because the capacity to do that means that you have to have confidence in your partner. You have to be able to have that trust. And there really is a liberation that you experience with that. Yeah. Where if you're bottling that stuff up, you're going to act it out unconsciously. It's going to show up as fights, passive aggressiveness, all sorts of weird shit.
Both men and women, whether they want to owning things is part of that dark side also. That's kind of like Scarlett Johansson saying, no, don't Photoshop my body. Leave me as I am. I have some butt. I'm a real woman. Otherwise, I am not going to allow you to promote me. That's some courage, okay?
Yeah.
So we, both men and women, have fantasies. And so the common ones you'll hear, because Eric and I are not trying to say that the darkness is solely connected to trauma or sexuality. We're talking about it being like connected to our full authentic self, our essence. But you've heard many women who went after the good-looking guy, or the guy who could play guitar and he had a Spanish accent. He knew how to eat food and cooked and knew a lot about wine, but he was inconsistent. He maybe wasn't as reliable. He wasn't maybe father material. Therefore, he wasn't safe. But there is this excitement you have with this man. And then there's the accountant or the safe guy or the boring guy who always shows up. Typically, Will Ferrell plays that character in several movies.
That's what
where he's just like the nice guy. He's smiling, and where he just always does the right thing. He's kind of maybe comes off as a geek. I'm not judging. he specifically is playing that character.
Yeah.
And so many women will say, God, if I could just combine the two, where I get the reliable guy, but the guy's passionate and who speaks like Antonio Banderas with a strong accent, you know, and seems to be rich and filled with life and shares amazing stories. Well, men have it also. And that could be where you'll see it. You'll see it in movies also. It's like this woman who is like, has a sister, like this Mother Teresa complex. She's out there working in the jungles, helping children, but she happens to be smoking hot also. To have that, and then her also be able to wear maybe fetish, you know, lingerie, and do both. Like, I think men want kind of like a woman who could be strong, a good mother, caring, nurturing, but also be a slut in a bedroom, to be able to lean into that also. But these are just like more archetypes that, you know, we can use language that many of us can identify to that and go, yeah, I have that, or I know that type of woman. I know that type of man. And let's just be honest. Like, many of us are attracted to that. What if that energy is there in your partner? What if they're just waiting for an invitation to go there? What if there's just maybe some unhealed stories and negativity around that is just waiting to just pop out?
Yeah, it's it can create a lot of adventure and purpose. A lot of, like Carl Jung talked about, a lot of your by exploring this stuff, you do unlock purpose, creativity, a sense of adventure in your life, and it's just helping you realize that, like, I don't know, like maybe something, you know, you and I have talked a lot about people that maybe get so into heaven that they're no good on earth, you know, kind of a thing. They're very upper energy is kind of what we're talking about.
So heavenly, no earthly good. Yes.
Yes. So heavenly, no earthly good. And that's an extreme, you know, statement, but it's like, the point is that, you know, I posted the other day, I was like, I think perhaps we came here to get out of heaven. Like, and get away from all that perfection where everything's perfectly harmonious, everything is known and understood and interconnected. And we're like, no, the fun is in actually forgetting that and coming and having an adventure in a reality where you don't know what's going to happen, you know, and the growth, and have to rediscover that through, like, you know, the expression of who you are, or whatever. That's my, like, poetic way of looking at it. But I just I've seen, the point is that any growth I've really had in my life has been by admitting to myself about what I truly desire. Right? Just actually owning, you know, what I'm desiring to no matter what society says or anything, just owning what that really is and bringing that up. And it will trigger discomfort. Like, you can, because we have this tribal part of us in that root chakra there. I think there's a lot of the starts you mentioned earlier about the connection to tribe. We are afraid of being betrayed, abandoned, or ostracized from the tribe, and we have an intense survival instinct to conform. And yet, we have to learn how to. I think the parody or the paradox here is that the people who they're most adaptable and who they're most accepted by society and who we celebrate are the ones who are willing to challenge the narrative.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. That they don't play it so safe. They're actually the ones that become the chief.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine anyone watching this is like a lot of information, maybe bring up a lot of stuff. And I want to move into this final segment. We close it out here with just having some empathy and compassion towards the reality that there has been a lot of things going on in the world. There's a lot of messages out there. That's what I'm trying to say. And there's not a lot of invitations to be accountable or to surround yourself. You might notice that you're with friends, but you end up, you might be sharing emotions and stuff you're going through, but you're not really getting a sense of forward progress. You're not really arriving at solutions for those things. It's just commiserating. Okay. You and I, Rave, are creating a group that we're about to launch called Soulful Synergy Seekers. And you mentioned before about this, the importance of having a container where you can step in and kind of talk about this stuff with other people who get this, and also be able to have access to some one-to-one coaching experiences in that to help maybe process any of the emotional dysregulation that comes up when trying to, look at this, these so-called darker aspects of ourselves. Why do you believe that having a container and a space to do this is so important for people?
Well, particularly if we're talking about this topic and something that you believe once was taboo needs to be spoken about, I would imagine you want to be surrounded by like-minded people. There's one part to it. Second part is this, and you've heard this before too, but I heard it from my girlfriend a couple days ago, where she has a friend that goes to the Joe Dispenza retreats, and she's been to them several times. And my girlfriend asked her colleague, why did she keep going? Because if you kind of know how to do the meditations, then, what more is there to learn, or what is it about it? And she says, because everyone there is already open to healing. And there's this positive synergy that happens to where if you're just there and you close your eyes, that you will feel the presence of others. And everyone wants to up-level their lives. So just being around consistent people can provide that container for all of us to improve our lives. As an example, this is a strange thing, but I think I can admit to it. So, Eric brought up about in the beginning of this interview about getting punched. Well, where was he punched at? Well, he was punched at one of my gigs. Yes, I'm a performer. Yes, I have a doctorate in clinical psychology. So I'm one of those guys who is an intellect, but I used to also take my clothes off and I played in an 80s band, a parody band. So I hope I walk my talk, but yes, I could be very cognitive, but I also can dance and be playful. And I remember one of the things that would happen when people would hire our band, like club owners. And we primarily did corporate events and weddings and things like that. However, when we were being invited to play like at a bar, one thing that would happen is that there's rarely fights, that the presence of joy and not taking life so seriously was there, to where I remember seeing macho guys spanking other guys in the butt. I don't know what would happen with the movement with us guys dressed in dolphin shorts, looking like dorks, being playful, but it was contagious. And you were there at these shows. It's like everyone got along.
Yeah, it's fun.
4 main people on stage we purposely self-deprecated. We made fun of ourselves. We made fun of the 80s. We did everything other than try to be serious and cool. And for whatever reason, the synergy of the bars we would play at would match that, to where everyone would get along. And so whenever, people come together in a group or a container, which you're talking about, Eric, there's a clear, trusting container. There's more fun. There's more growth. There's more learning. It's all things I enjoy.
Yeah. I'm just sitting here thinking, if you go back hundreds, thousands of years, and let's just say you were legitimately in a tribe, okay? Even though there's tribes today, but say you're in a tribe is more going to feel more like a family.
Yes.
Everyone's going to know everyone in that tribe. And when challenges in the world, whether they be weather, seasons, movement of animals, another tribe that there's some contention with, that, whatever it is, you would get your tribe together and you would talk. And you'd bring these things up, and you would talk about the challenges that we're all facing, and you would come and establish common ground with each other about what we're going to do about it. And that unity would be your source of growth and protection. Yeah. And I think
you would get honest feedback also from the tribe.
Yeah. And so maybe what we're really experiencing in today's culture, ironically, is we're afraid of being judged. We're afraid of being abandoned or betrayed or whatever this fear is by the collective, when really we're not even functioning as a tribe. And maybe you're actually missing tribe. Maybe that's what's actually the issue, is that you're not having someone to bounce these deeper things. And so you're holding this within yourself, and you don't have an environment or people around you that you can really talk about your true self with, or it feels that way to you.
Well,
so
two things come up too, is that if, like, when we're in intimate relationships, it's easier for the shadows to come up. And so when we go to our therapist or a coach or talk about it with someone else, they just see us in our true happy form. So they'll say, it must be your wife or husband. I don't see it, Joe. Well, in these containers, when you are talking about these intimate things, there's a good chance also your stuff will show up, which is a great thing, because within that container, then we can work on it. Then we can process it in a safer way. Like even with you, like Eric, in time, you've gotten to know my personality. You've sensed when there's like stuff happening in my life, when you feel me being more impatient. However, when I experience impatience with my girlfriend, sometimes she goes into like, what did I do wrong? She takes it personally, or how can I make him feel better? With you, you're like, fuck, dude, we're just on this call. You have moments that go in there with me, but it's like, because you and I don't live together, because we have the space, and we also know we just don't spend enough time to bother each other. You don't take it personally, so you're able to say, "Hey, Ray, how you doing today?" And I might answer like, "Fuck, dude, I think I'm stressed." Done.
Yeah.
That question lightened the mood already.
I'll hammer that. It's crazy how simple that is to calm emotions.
Yeah.
When your pain is validated, it evaporates.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's asking for. It's just asking to be paid attention to.
Yeah.
And if you're in an environment where you don't feel like you can truly discuss your pain, even that may, it's probably true that you could more than you think you can, but having people that you have synergy with, that you can discuss this stuff, is important. So that was our inspiration, and we want to say, how can we create community?
Can I say one last thing too?
Yes.
Would be this.
Sure.
This is the big one, and that is, as an example, if someone gets into politics and they're an extreme left or right, it's going to be really difficult for a lot of people to witness that. And so there's going to be this yearning of a referee, or could you please have that person not talk about that here in this platform. So most conversations with family and friends, there's not that container. And so I'm part of a men's group where they always open up with that. We're not going to talk about politics, religion, and whatever else. And it's not because they're not important, but it's because it's fucking clear we have different opinions.
Yeah.
But regardless of our, say, political opinions, many of us can agree that, regardless of who I vote for, I want to explore more of my darker sexuality.
Yeah.
We have that in common. And so it creates the opportunity for us to talk about the things that we have in common, that we share collectively.
Yes.
And we want to better